Okay, well, can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yes, we can.
I don't know whether you
Alright.
could hear me or not.
Okay, I will go again. I already had a practice run, so hopefully it'll be easier this time round. My name is Karishma Gokhlevar, and I work for LEDS-GP, and I also work with, just a moment, I'm trying to get my slides on. So, thank you for your patience while we figure out the technical issues. I'd like to request everyone to please mute the GoToMeeting webinar if they're not speaking, so we don't have any background disturbance. We can still hear people right now, so it'd be great if you can do that. It's on the in your webinar, in your window, on the GoToMeeting window on the left-hand side. Welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. I'm gonna very quickly present the agenda. After this, Nikhil Kolse Patil will introduce us to the Asia LEDS partnership, the activities, important priorities for this year, and also a little bit of an introduction to this community of practice. After that, everyone will have an opportunity to talk a little bit about themselves, which country they're from, the roles they play in this space. And then Ilya Chernyakhovsky will present on the 6 building blocks of scaling up renewable energy. And we're lucky today to have Manish and Narendra with us. They work for a transmission utility in India, and they'll talk to us a little bit about, focusing a little bit on renewable energy zones and transmission planning and grid integration. And then we'll have an opportunity to speak and discuss, talk a little bit about the challenges you're facing. So we've sent out some prep questions ahead of this meeting. And it'd be nice to hear from you what progress, what targets have been met or even set in your countries. And then we'll close and talk about next steps, what you want to see from this community of practice, what should the next session look like. And so with that, again, thank you and welcome. Nikhil, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, sorry, Karishma. I don't know if everyone is facing this. I could not see your screen, but I will just share my screen and run through the presentation.
Okay, that sounds fine. Thank you. And maybe, Nikhil, if there's technical difficulties, why don't you just manage the screen, and you can just, progress the slides as we talk through them.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, a warm welcome to all of you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I am Nikhil Kolse Patil. I am part of the ALP team. I am also part of the ICLEI South Asia team, and I'm based in India, and I've experience of working in areas of energy and climate change in the region. To kick off our session today, I will begin with an introduction in the details of this community of practice, what activities we'll undertake as part of this group, and how will it benefit all of us. The community of practice on grid-scale renewable energy, this is an initiative of the LEDS-GP, the Energy Working Group, and the Asia LEDS Partnership. So just going to give a brief introduction about these networks and groups. The LEDS Global Partnership, that is the LEDS-GP, is a larger global network of practitioners and public and private institutions who are actively working on low emission development strategies. This network brings together over 350 institutions from about 120 countries There are also thousands of individual practitioners, both from national as well as subnational governments, who are engaged through this network. The global partnership operates through 4 regional networks or platforms. These are based in Asia, Latin America, Africa, and Eurasia. We are the Asia Partnership, focusing on the Asian region. The Let's GP is also supported by 6 technical working groups with field expertise in different areas. The technical working groups essentially provide technical support and training across the regions. These technical working groups include transport, subnational integration, benefits, agriculture and forestry, finance, and finally the energy working group, which is supporting this community of practice. So as you can see on the slide, we have information on the Asia platform, the Asia Let's Partnership. This network caters to the Asian region and has 750 members from 15 plus countries. The objectives essentially are to bring together practitioners from governments, developmental organizations, NGOs, businesses, academia, and others to promote collaboration, to ensure that organizations and individuals from different countries, like the group in this session, partner together, work together to identify and share tools, models, best practices for peer learning, for knowledge exchange. We also promote capacity building and raise awareness, foster leadership in the region. So how do we do this? We do this through various means, by connecting members, by bringing together members through various events. It can be large events such as the recent Asia Let's Partnership Forum, which was held in Hanoi in December 2017. This was attended by about 200 participants from various Asian countries, including the countries that we have on this call, on this webinar. We also conduct smaller focused workshops as well. For example, in March 2017, last year, we conducted a workshop for our members on how private sector investment in clean energy could be enabled in the Southeast Asia and South Asia region at the Clean Energy Forum in Manila. Also, we conduct webinars on various topics to share with our members experiences from countries, learnings that countries have, as well as tools. So we have had webinars on how countries can use the US National Renewable Energy Laboratories Geospatial Toolkit, for example, to assess renewable energy potential. We also develop a lot of resource material, case studies, best practice documents, and so on. So the ALP is always keen to address the needs of our members, and based on this, we have identified 4 priority topic areas for this year. These include grid scale renewable energy, which focuses on achieving high levels of renewable energy and looking at various aspects related to renewable energy development, grid integration. These relate to data, incentives, generation and transmission, infrastructure for this, financing of renewable energy, use of storage for better integration. We'll know more when we get into the session further. Clean mobility is also another priority area this year. Financing of clean energy is a key area identified by members. So this essentially will focus on identifying strategies and interventions to lower the cost and risk of capital for renewable energy financing. Also looking at how private finance can be leveraged through regulations, through permitting, pricing, other financial incentives. Multi-level governance, this again is an area which focuses, a topic which focuses on enhancing integration and coordination between different levels of governance in countries. So based on these priority topics, we are looking to support and work with members, and we are looking to develop community of practice for all these 4 topics in this year. And I'm happy to share that the Grid Renewable Energy Community of Practice, with this session, it's the first to initiate activities in this regard. So coming to why we are here, this community of practice, the intention is to have an interactive group of various actors and experts engaged in work to tackle policy, financing, and technical challenges and solutions related to renewable energy deployment. This initiative, this group is basically set up to be a platform for learning together from each other and along with each other, for sharing experiences, and also to serve as a platform to access expert knowledge, all with the intention of furthering renewable energy integration at the grid scale. It is also vital that this network, through this network, we intend to cater to your needs to make it useful and effective for all of us. So this is basically driven by your demands. So we also wish to offer technical support to early movers once we have a clearer picture of needs in specific countries. So in terms of what opportunities are there for all of you from this platform, a number of opportunities exist. There are opportunities to learn from each other and from experts. Also, this can be through topic-specific sessions like the one we have today. Your input is also important to drive this group, this network forward, to drive discussions forward. We want all of you to interact and to share experiences. We plan to build and share resources such as country examples, best practices. So, for example, we want to know how is Sri Lanka going ahead with its ambitious plans for renewable energy? How is Bangladesh moving with energy access plans? What is the role of renewable energy in this? For example, let's see how experiences have been with generation-based incentives for various renewable energy sources. We also intend to look at organizing face-to-face training workshops. So there is a potential for a workshop to be held in the Asia Clean Energy Forum, which is coming up in June in Manila, dependent on funding, where we want to take all of you and again do a workshop on the topic. Also, we have tools that can be shared through this platform. There are existing tools such as the Energy Toolkit, which has been developed by the Energy Working Group, which features a number of energy planning related tools that all of you can use. You can make use of no-cost technical assistance. So we can offer specific assistance to meet countries' needs, be it guidance on policy or application of best practices. In the past 2 years or so, we have offered this to Pakistan and Philippines that I'd like to highlight. We assisted Pakistan's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Agency by offering technical guidance on street lighting standards, energy efficiency measures in this regard. For Philippines, the Department of Energy in Metro Manila was provided technical assistance as well to help them promote energy efficiency in public buildings and to establish benchmarks. So this is going to be an interactive group, and we also have expectations from members. Your inputs are vital. We would like to learn from you, from your experience in renewable energy planning and deployment, what worked, what did not work in your work, in your experience. You can always go back and share materials, share learnings with your colleagues. Say, for example, on incentives, you can share this with your colleagues at work so that it helps to advance policies, plans in your country. If you think a tool will be useful for someone from other departments or in other organizations in your network, we would be happy if you could share this with them. In terms of who do we have in our group, so there are opportunities for peer learning from our colleagues from as many as 9 countries. These countries include Bangladesh, China, Myanmar, Philippines, India, Vietnam, Laos PDR, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. We have about 35 plus members as part of the community of practice. Most of the members represent national government, ministries, regulatory agencies related to electricity and power sector. We also have members from technical research institutes, subnational governments and associations. So all in all, this represents a diverse group with technical and planning background, research backgrounds, members who are interested in furthering renewable energy at the local level. So this gives a good opportunity for exchanging knowledge and experiences and to share all this from different perspectives. In order to better design our focus areas and activities, we sought information from all of you, since this community of practice is meant to engage you and so that you find it useful. So the primary interest that emerged was in picking up lessons, best practices, policy mechanisms, and to apply this in the local context on topics related to renewable energy development, related to grid integration of renewable energy. So we have incorporated all of this in our initial sessions. We have also learned that you are keen to access expert support and tools for renewable energy integration. So we will definitely be open to that, and we'll be designing activities in this regard. And also going forward, we are keen to hear from you what are your needs. Based on the feedback from members, again, we have outlined the proposed plan of activities for the coming year. So if you can see in bold, we already have 3 sessions planned. Online session 1, which is this first session, it focuses on the basic building blocks that that will help countries establish policy, regulatory and investment environment needed to achieve large-scale deployment of renewable energy. We will also go into a deep dive on strategic energy planning, helping all of us become familiar with methods, terminology, and potential benefits of energy planning and target setting. In the second session in early May, next month, the focus will be on understanding how through innovative RE policies, renewable energy policies, incentives, how we can drive private sector investment, how we can increase cost competitiveness, and therefore spur large renewable energy deployment. We will also learn about best practices and emerging trends in other countries. The third session, you can see, as I already mentioned, is a potential face-to-face workshop in June. This session will focus on providing a basic understanding of how grids operate, the challenges and solutions that come with integrating high levels of renewable sources to the grid. You will also understand basic concepts of grid reliability, stability, and frequently used options to increase flexibility. We will also be sharing resources and tools with all of you on the topic in this month and in the coming months. A subsequent online session 3 is scheduled between August and September, and we are keen to see how to finalize the topic based on needs emerging from our discussions going forward. There is, of course, also technical country-specific technical assistance available across the year to countries. So all in all, your inputs are vital to help finalize the plan of activities, the topics that we should look at. Your feedback is also important to help us understand on how effective and useful activities that this group undertakes are in your day-to-day work. So that is it from my side, and I now hand it over to Karishma for the round of introductions.
Okay, thank you so much, Nikhil. If you'll proceed to the next slide, please. So I'll start with myself. This is just an opportunity to know who else is on this online meeting, and I'll maybe try to prompt each country, and we can go from there because we can't see each other, so it's kind of tricky. But again, my name is Karishma. I'm originally from India, but now I work in NREL. I live in the US, and I'm a project leader at the lab here. I have experience working both in the US and abroad, but currently what I'm working on focuses on providing technical assistance to developing country governments on clean energy planning and strategy. And then I also support some renewable energy and microgrid projects, energy resilience planning, and help different countries with energy transition. I'll pass it on to my colleague Ilya.
Hi, my name is Ilya Chernykowski. I'm also at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and Asia-led partnership, and I work primarily on grid integration issues, focused on Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan.
Okay, I'll pass it on to Manish.
Hello, everybody. My name is Manish Ranjan Kesri. I'm working transmission utility in India, and I basically work in the field of transmission system planning for like all kind of generation projects, strengthening and stability studies. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Narendra Sathik. I work in the Central Bank of India, and I work basically in the field of grid integration of renewable. Thank you.
Okay. So I know we have someone from Nepal on the meeting. Would you like to introduce yourself? Mr. Pandey, maybe you can unmute and. Okay, maybe we can go down the list. Let's see. Is someone from Laos on the phone today? We can't hear you. You can. Not everyone's there. Okay. Mr. Doidon, can you introduce yourself, please? I think you have to unmute yourself.
Could you just let everyone know how to unmute, maybe?
No. Hi there.
If you're not speaking, can you please mute? Thank you. I think we figured out the technical difficulties, so we can hear everyone now. Can we start at the beginning, please? Mr. Pandey from Nepal, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, Mr. Haidar, I think you were talking. We could hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm Shah Zulfikar Haidar from Bangladesh.
Yes, Mr. Haidar, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I work in a rural electric cooperative, and my main interest and expertise in grid integration, energy efficiency, and other things, smart grid, smart technology, and now I'm working with future energy or future utility. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fun from Vietnam Ministry of Planning Investment.
Yeah, Mr. Tuan, go on, please.
We have someone from Sri Lanka, the Ceylon Electricity Board. Would you like to introduce yourself?
เขาได้มีเวิร์กช็อปอยู่
Hello everyone.
ออนไลน์เรื่อง renewable energy นะใครสนใจแล้วเขาฟังได้ฮู้สิได้บ่เขาเปิด
Hello everyone. I am from Sri Lanka. Am I good to talk?
EED LEED
Hello, Mr. Tuan. Can you please mute yourself?
So you can see who's speaking here.
Right. Hello everyone. I am Randika Vijayakon. I am from Sri Lanka.
Can you say a little bit more about the organization you work for and what you're working on? What are some of what's the topics you're interested in, maybe?
Okay, I work for the national utility of the country, the Ceylon Electricity Board. I mainly work in the area of generation expansion planning at the long term, and at the same time, I also work on the renewable energy integration, and we perform both kind of studies routinely. So I'm happy to be a part of this community and in this webinar as well.
Okay, thank you. I know we have a number of participants from Bangladesh. Would other people like to introduce themselves? Maybe Mr. Alam, Mr. Haidar. Not Shah Haidar, but Sadaf. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi everyone. This is Sadaf. I'm so sorry. I'm caught up between my work. I'm currently working at Malaysia now, so I'm like working and simultaneously participating in this webinar. What I do is I'm just a researcher in renewable energy, and I'm also pursuing my studies. So I'm just new in this field, actually.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Is someone from Laos on the phone? Mr. Bunwa? Dina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sorry, what was the name?
Dana Kenny, would you like to introduce
Oh, that's
yourself?
me.
Hi.
That's fine. Hearing my surname made it clear it's me. Hello, I'm Dana Kenny. I work for the USAID Clean Power Asia program based in Bangkok, working in the Lower Mekong and ASEAN. And I'm the chief of party. I'm here with one of my colleagues who I'll let introduce himself, one of our consultants. But we are focused on promoting investment in grid-connected renewable energy in the region, and so are very interested in what LEDS GP is doing, and hope to encourage and work with our counterparts in these countries as they participate in this working group. This, what do you call it? Not a working group, but
Community
the
of practice.
COP, Community of Practice. Thank you, thank you. And so we're looking to just understand the plans for the community practice and how we might support it. And my colleague is here. I'll let him introduce himself.
So my name is Matthew Christian. As Dana mentioned, I'm on the USAID Clean Power Asia program. I'm primarily focused on investment mobilization and private sector engagement. So interested in a lot of the activities this organization is doing. Looking forward to some partnership opportunities.
Thank you both, and excited to hear, and we really look forward to growing this partnership as well.
Very good, thank you.
Yvonne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. It's a good opportunity to join this community, and I'm working with ICLEI East Asia Secretariat, and we are working with Southeast Asia Secretariat to facilitate this Asia Leads partnership. So we are trying to coordinate other countries in East Asia, like China, Mongolia, South Korea, Japan, and also Taiwan. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, and thank you for joining today. Let's try a participant from Laos. Would you like to speak a little bit today? I think you're trying to speak, but we can't hear you. So maybe that's just a technical difficulties. Maybe you could type a message in the chat box below. All right. Well, I think we're having technical difficulties, so apologies. But if anyone would like, who's not already introduced themselves, would like to introduce themselves, just in the interest of time, I think we'll just continue with the agenda. But if you'd like to also type in the chat box below on your GoToMeeting window, that would be excellent, and we can continue our conversation. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Karishma. Thanks everyone for joining. In the interest of time, and we're very sensitive about your time, we know that you're busy people, and we appreciate you joining this group. So in the interest of that, I'll try to make my presentation as short as possible. I'll briefly introduce the 6 building blocks for scaling up renewable energy, and then we'll do a quick overview of each one of those, and then we'll move over into a group discussion. So next slide, please. So objectives in general of this session that we're all on today is to understand global energy trends in clean energy, to understand why the building blocks, the 6 building blocks that we'll be speaking about, are considered the core components of scaling up renewable energy, to understand the key technical and institutional aspects of each building block, to explain how the building blocks are complementary and where they integrate with each other, and then finally to incorporate those building blocks in the design of clean energy policies and regulations. So next slide. Why are we talking about clean energy? Well, first of all, clean energy is one of the most cost-effective ways to begin to replace high carbon electricity generation with lower carbon emitting sources. Second, renewable energy is approaching the least cost solution for new generation. As an example, here I've presented very recent data from the least cost of energy estimates for India. And one data point, this is not to be comprehensive, but it is an example of where the markets are heading. We see that the latest cost estimates for utility scale solar PV are below those of a new combined cycle gas plant. And the same goes for wind. where the least cost of energy in India right now for new wind installation is lower than that of a gas plant, still higher than coal, but we see the trend in prices going towards increasing competitiveness of solar and wind. Finally, renewable energy provides energy security, energy access, economic growth, and socioeconomic benefits, all of which topics we'll be discussing as we discuss the building blocks. So next slide, please. So we know that global greenhouse gas emissions fuel consumption for fossil fuels are the main contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the key ways that we know we can reduce our emissions of global greenhouse gases is by transitioning to lower emitting fuel resources like solar and wind. So next slide. At the same time, we see dramatic cost declines in wind and solar. Global trends point to a continuing decline in their costs. And as we follow this cost curve for another 5 and 10 years in the future, we see that wind and solar being very competitive with traditional generation energy sources in more and more markets around the world. Next slide, please. This cost trend has shown that investments in clean energy are increasing steadily year over year, and more so in the Asia region. So you see this trend that more investments out of the share of total energy, renewable energy investments are happening in the Asia region in recent years. Next slide, please. One of the key drivers of this trend is a commitment by the country to install large amounts of clean energy. So these are some examples of the commitments that countries in the Asia region have taken. Many of these are greenhouse gas reduction commitments for a future year. And part of the implementing plan or NDC commitment is to install large amounts of wind and solar generation. And so that comes with many of its own challenges. And those challenges have solutions that we can talk about on this webinar and on future meetings. Next slide, please. So these are the 6 building blocks for renewable energy that we have identified in collaboration with USAID and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. The 6 building blocks were identified in countries that are scaling up renewable energy at a rapid rate. We found that these building blocks present the most of the countries that have the largest amount of renewable energy in the world today. These countries include Brazil, China, Germany, India, South Africa, the UK, and the US. The building blocks are strategic energy planning, smart incentives, grid integration, competitive procurement, renewable energy zones, and finance. And now I'll briefly define each one of those. Next slide, please. So the first is strategic energy planning. So a strategic energy plan begins with a goal or a target being set, and then a policy and a regulation established in order to meet that goal, and then actions are put into place to implement and achieve those targets. These actions can take different forms. So for example, a LEDS or low emission development strategy is a national level goal. For example, the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. We also see local goals and strategies. So for example, the Chicago Climate Action Plan, and there are many other local city level goals that we can use as examples. There are also can be regional targets. So for example, the European Commission regional targets for greenhouse gas reductions in Europe. Next slide, please. An integrated resource planning framework is one method to achieve the strategic energy goal that is set out at the policy level. So an integrated resource plan identifies what is the resource mix that is most effective. It produces a long-term outlook for new resources. It helps to understand what are the risks associated with climate change. It looks at the demand side and to understand what is projected electricity demand. It produces an integrated cost model of the characteristics of a future energy plan. And then you create a least cost planning model that takes into account different scenarios of development so that policymakers can understand which scenarios are most cost effective to pursue. And we can continue to talk about the integrated resource planning framework in our conversations tonight and in future webinars. But now we'll move to the next building block. Next building block is competitive procurement. Next slide, please. So when we talk about competitive procurement, typically we're referring to renewable energy auctions or reverse auctions for renewable energy. Auctions help to bring down the cost of renewable energy. They help the market naturally find the price for solar and wind in the country that is performing the auction. It streamlines the procurement process, and it helps to eliminate the boom and bust cycle that we sometimes see with other forms of procurement. So next slide, please. This is an example of some of the outcomes of recent renewable energy auctions around the world. And the point is to point out that renewable energy auctions can help discover prices that previously we weren't even aware were possible. So for example, in recent solar energy auction in Mexico, the price of solar came in lower than that of new natural gas generation. We look at a recent auction in Chile, the price of solar came in lower than the price of natural gas and also lower than the price of a new coal plant. Now this is just one example. This will not apply to all countries, but it is evocative of the kind of prices that some countries were able to discover using a competitive procurement. Next slide, please. So reverse auctions are more than just a procurement mechanism. We're often talking about an auction program and not just an auction. So this program may include a comprehensive energy sector planning, provision of finance, and regulatory frameworks to enable competition and private sector participation in the energy sector. And this reform agenda would serve to reduce risks for the private sector in participating in the energy generation industry. These programs have been proven to be a successful structure in which the government attracts private sector investment and organizes how generation should be built in the future. So next slide, please. So we'll have an opportunity at the end for you to ask questions about these building blocks, but for now we'll move on to the next building block. And that is renewable energy zones. So next slide, please. So a renewable energy zones process is a transmission planning process in which the planning of new transmission is focused on locating new renewable energy resources that are the most cost-effective to develop. One example of this transmission planning process that was focused on renewables is from the Texas case study, which is displayed here. We also have a very nice example from India called the Green Energy Corridors, which is a long-term transmission planning process that is focused on integrating high amounts of wind and solar generation. and we'll hear more about that later in this webinar. Most importantly, the Renewable Energy Zones process helps to develop new transmission to areas where private sector actors are able to make new investments that otherwise may not have been accessible. So next slide, please. Next building block is smart incentives, and here we're talking about incentives for renewable energy development. Next slide. So smart incentives are focused on setting predictable rules of the game. And they're broken up into early commercialization incentives in markets that are just beginning to introduce renewable energy. The second category is policy support incentives that are focused on bridging the gap between the cost of renewable energy and conventional generation. And then in more developed markets, incentives may be focused on improving the cost effectiveness of integrating very large amounts of renewable energy into the grid. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of smart incentives that we see used around the world. They're broken up into four categories here: fiscal incentives, financing incentives, contractual and regulatory incentives, and operational incentives. Now, I won't go and talk about each of these in detail, but one I can point out that is a nice case study is, for example, the government of Kenya removed the import tax on solar products to reduce the cost of solar installations to consumers and to encourage more people to buy PV. That's an example of a tax-related incentive that can help reduce costs within the country. Next slide, please. One important aspect of incentives, and something that we like to refer to as smart incentives, is to plan ahead for future energy development. So one example of a not so smart incentive is an investment tax credit that had expired at a set date, and this was a legislative incentive that was done in the United States for solar energy. And here we can clearly see the effect of an expiration of an incentive in 2017, where you have this very large interest in installations in 2016, and then a very large dip in 2017. And that is largely a factor of the incentive and less of the real market dynamics. Next slide, please. So the fifth building block that we'll talk about is grid integration, and grid integration has a lot packed into it. So next slide. In general, grid integration is the practice of developing efficient ways to deliver variable renewable energy to the grid. Wind and solar resources are geographically dispersed, and they're not always aligned with where the centers of load are. And so we have to think about what generating resources will complement wind and solar resources. Where are the best locations to develop those wind and solar resources? And how will the grid be able to integrate those resources efficiently? Will we have any issues with the transmission grid when we add large amounts of variable renewable energy? And will we have any issues related to meeting peak demand during times of low renewable energy production? So those are the kind of questions that we think about with integrating large amounts of variable renewables. And we can talk about many different methodologies for studying those issues. And then we can also point to solutions that have been developed around the world to getting around some of the challenges for integrating renewables. Next slide, please. So if we talk about solutions, this chart here presents many of the solutions that we found are effective, and then we rank them by cost. And what we see is that those interventions that are least costly are typically ones that do not require any capital investments. So these are institutional changes to the way that the system was operated that can help improve grid integration and reduce the levels of possible curtailment. These include changes to grid codes, interconnection requirements, implementation of renewable energy forecasting, changes to system operations, such as expanding the balancing footprint of a system operator, and increasing the time interval of gate closure and dispatch of the system. And these are all non-capital investment interventions that are least costly and especially relevant for those countries that are pursuing 10 to 15% of renewable energy penetration. At much higher levels, then additional transmission infrastructure and storage may become relevant. So next slide, please. The last building block that we'll quickly define is the finance. Next slide. So finance is primarily focused on lowering the risks associated with making investments in renewable energy and increasing access to finance. So public examples of public interventions in finance include loan guarantees, low interest loans, accelerated depreciation. Private finance interventions include standardized contracts between a renewable energy producer and an off-taker, for example. Methods to reduce risk and development of new business models in the country, such as leasing, that can help reduce the cost of financing for a large-scale system. Next slide. So I think we have time for a couple of questions, if anyone has any questions for me. After that, we'll move to some concrete examples from India. And if you do have questions and we're not able to hear you, you can use the chat feature in the GoToWebinar platform.
Glenn, can you specify which terms in specific? Maybe we can go over those. There was a comment that some of the terms were not clear, perhaps, in the presentation. And so if you have a specific example or a specific question, then maybe we can elaborate.
Hi, could you maybe go back a couple of slides before the finance? Oh yeah, so could you explain a little bit more technically what is strategic renewable energy curtailment and balancing footprint?
Sure. So I'll start with the first one. Strategic energy curtailment, renewable energy curtailment involves the ability of the system operator to reduce the amount of renewable generation that's currently on the grid in order to maintain system reliability. And this is a feature of a system operator that needs to focus on maintaining reliability without impacting the financial viability of those renewable energy companies. So an example I can provide is here in Colorado, where the lab is based, we have contracts between the system operator and the renewable energy generators, particularly wind plants, that provide a certain number of hours in the year where they can be curtailed, but they still get paid for that power that is curtailed. And that is done primarily to maintain system reliability in hours, possibly when you have very low demand and very high wind, when all of your coal generators or other gas plants are not able to generate any lower than they are currently generating. Does that answer that question? And then I can move on to the next one.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so expanded balancing footprint. Here we're referring to different sizing of balancing areas. So I'll give an example of, let's say, California. So the California system operator has a lot of solar power that they're integrating on their system. And then there's a neighboring state, Nevada, that might have a lot of gas generation. I'm just using a hypothetical example here. If Nevada is able to optimize its operations throughout the day with California's solar energy system, it may be more cost effective for Nevada to ramp down its coal plant during the day when California is producing a lot of solar energy and import some of that solar energy from California, if those two system operators are able to cooperate and coordinate their operations. So that's what we mean by balancing area cooperation. So we had another question. What are the problems of grid integration with age-old traditional grid? And how do we tackle variable RE production, especially solar, in the case of storm and rain? So if, for example, you've built a lot of solar on your system and you plan to build a lot of solar on your system, there's a type of planning called contingency planning. This is focused on ensuring that at all times there's enough capacity on the system to meet demand. So this is a long-term type of planning that factors in all possible outages of any generator, including a solar generator. So, for example, a day when there's no sun. And this long-term planning ensures that there are enough reserves on the system in order to meet demand in cases when some generation resource is not available.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ilya. And we're not seeing any questions coming, but please feel free to keep asking them, and we'll have opportunity to come back and address some of these. And so if we can move to the next slide, maybe we'll let Manish and Satvik tell us a little bit about their experience working in India. Next slide, please.
So hello everybody, this is Manish. Like I introduced myself earlier, I work in transmission utility in India, and I'm currently in a fellowship program at NREL. So to start with, I'll explain about the transmission planning process that is followed in India presently. So for planning any new transmission system in our country, The various kind of inputs that we use for planning are like the demand projections. These are again done by some government agencies. They project demand for long term, like the 5-year, 10-year down the line demand. And the demands are basically state-wise demand. And in each state, there is further bifurcation of like residential demand, industrial demand, and things like that. So we plan transmission system to meet those demands. Then there are transmission systems built for new generation capacity additions. So like there could be new generation projects coming up in certain areas, and we have to evacuate those generations to the nearest grid points. And so we built an immediate system and a strengthening in the grid, so for further dispersal of power. And then there are some transmission systems which are built based on operational feedbacks from system operators, because the systems that are planned for long term, they are planned based on certain assumptions. And when a system comes into operation, then the thing is not all the things fall in line how we assumed. So there could be some constraints in the power flow into certain areas, and then there could be some certain change in scenarios. So to address that short-term problem, also there are like some short-term planning done to remove those minor system constraints. Then like in India, the planning is mostly the open access applications is what is that for planning interstate lines. So like in India, there are like the system planning is done in 2 levels. One is the interstate level between the states, and then other is the intrastate. And the intrastate is done by the state utilities, and the interstate planning is done by the central authorities, like the CEA, it is Central Electricity Authority, and Power Grid, who is the central transmission utility of India. And so in India, we have like 3 open access products: the long term, medium term, and short term. And generally, the transmission system is built for the long term. So if someone applies for like the long term transaction of power, saying that I need this much of power from certain location, or some generator setting up a generation plant and saying that they need to send long-term power to certain load areas, so they apply to central transmission utility, and then the transmission systems are built for that. And whatever margins are inherently created in planning long-term systems, basically the system used for long-term transaction of power, that margins are used for medium-term transactions and short-term transactions. The long-term transactions presently in India are like, for if you intend to transfer power for more than 7 years, that is considered long-term. And medium-term is like from 3 months to 5 years is medium-term. And short-term is like very next day to few days to up to 3 months. And short-term is basically handled by the system operator. So whatever margins are there in the system on day-to-day basis, that are allocated by the system operators to various people. And then there are other kind of transmission systems built for strengthening the grid to like they improve the stability of the system and all those things. So based on all this inputs or type of planning that is need to be done, we do a lot of system studies, load flow studies, and then stability studies. And sometimes if required, we also do the EMTP studies for planning our system. And then after we have done studies and we've come out with various alternatives, and the planning in India is like we evaluate the alternatives based on, technically based on the transmission planning criteria. It is a document that is published by Central Electricity Authority. It is a technical body of Ministry of Power, and so that based on that document, we evaluate our alternatives technically, and then we find out the costs of the alternatives also. So, and based on that, we come out with best techno-economical alternatives. And now these alternatives and their pros, cons, and benefits and everything are discussed with the stakeholders. Like basically they are the state utilities, the DISCOMs, everybody who would be using the system and paying for it. And so we there in the meetings, we agree to one particular system, that yeah, this system needs to be built to address our demand, or for new generation capacity addition, or for strengthening, or whatever purpose maybe. And once the system has been finalized, the system could be implemented in two ways. Either it goes through tariff-based competitive bidding, or it can be implemented through regulated tariff mechanism. So I explained the two. What predominantly is followed is the tariff-based competitive bidding. Only if tariff-based competitive bidding cannot be used, then only a regulated tariff mechanism is presently used. So in tariff-based competitive bidding, it is like this system is now open. There is a agency who builds a special purpose vehicle, what we call. It is basically a company who would be implementing the evolved transmission system. And now people bid for the building that system, that how, in what cost I will build this system. And then again reverse auctioning process is also followed to get the best cost to build the transmission system, and whoever bids the lowest, they get to build the system. And then what regulated tariff mechanism is, that suppose there is a system that is required very urgently, or there is a very important need for certain system, and you need to implement in a very compressed time schedule, because for building every transmission system in India, like for 400 kV line, 765 kV line, depending upon how many circuits are there is a predefined time limits by the regulator, that okay, for building a 400 kV line of a double circuit, you have to build it in 36 months. So whoever is bidding in the tariff-based competitive bidding, he has to take care of that in 36 months he has to build that system, and accordingly he quotes. But suppose if that system is required in 24 months or 20 months something, so there are powers with Ministry of Power that they can say that this particular system may be built on a regulated tariff mechanism by the Central Transmission Utility, which is presently Power Grid Corporation of India Limited in India. So this is the two modes in which a transmission system can be implemented in India. So the next slide, please. So now with a lot of RE generation coming up in India, like the government has set up a very ambitious target of achieving 175 gigawatt of renewable installed capacity in India by 21-22. And presently we have around 63 gigawatt of renewable energy, but by 21-22 we intend to connect around 175 gigawatt, which includes 100 gigawatt is of solar, and 60 is wind, and rest 15 is it is small hydro and biomass and all those things. But if you can see from the slide is that there are a lot of potential for solar and wind in India. The total potential for wind in India is around 3,000 gigawatts, and for solar it is around 20,800 gigawatts. And if you can see from the figure that the most of the RE generation is located towards the left, what we call it is the western region and the southern region and a part of northern region. And these are again the major load centers of the country, and where in these states most of the industries and all those things, major load centers are located, and there only new RE is coming up. So with RE, the main thing is in conventional generation project, any coal or hydro plant, they take 4 to 5 years to commission, and a transmission system also usually used to take 4 to 5 years for completion in India. So the things used to go hand in hand. But RE, the main thing is the RE, you can set up a solar or a wind plant in a very short time, in 2 or 3 years. But for building a transmission system and a longer transmission system, you need a time period of at least 3 years or 4 years sometime. So we had to change a little bit our planning. So basically we have now started planning the transmission system ahead of the generation, that anticipating that these are the projections and that government has set up a target and we have to meet them. Then even the private sector is very much interested in setting up large projects. So we are going ahead with building transmission system so that no power is bottled up. So all the RE can be evacuated all the time. So now my colleague will speak little about how we have developed some of the RE based corridors in India. And so I'll hand it over to Satvik.
Okay, good morning. I'm Satvik. I also work in the Transmission Utility of India, and currently I'm in NREL for PACE Fellowship. And okay, next slide, please. Yeah, this is what we see at what is renewable integration needs. Like renewable energy comes up with variability and uncertainty, that you cannot predict exactly how much renewable energy will be coming up in the next minute or next 1 hour. So always there is an error and there is some uncertainty and variability. Uncertainty may be in the form of like cloud covering in the solar or some hailstorm or some twister, something like that. So these things system flexibility is the need of the earth to increase more and more renewable energy. What is system flexibility? Flexibility in the form of generation, that is hydro, all those things which can be ramped up and ramped down quickly, so that whenever there is a variation in the renewable energy generation, the flexible resources can be scaled up or scaled down to adjust the grid, and so that the grid stability is maintained. And flexibility in terms of transmission. What is the transmission flexibility means? Robust transmission system if we build so that the small issue at one run does not affect the transmission. So strong grid integration is the need of the. And in case of distribution flexibility is like demand side management and load management. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the example which Ilya was telling about, the like zone-based RE zones like generation. He gave the example of Texas, where zones were identified and planning was done. The similar thing was done in India, as we saw in the 2 slides before. Most of the renewable energy potential is lying in the western part of India, that is in Gujarat and Rajasthan, where lot of solar and wind potentials are available. So based on that, the power grid transmission utility planned in advance that these zones are the potential zones where actual generation will come up in future in huge quantum. So based on that, the corridor was developed. This corridor starts from the end of the western India to all through the Jammu and Kashmir in the northern part of the country. So these are high capacity corridors, and they are provided with complete reactive compensation, so that when the generation is not there, the grid voltage is maintained, stability is maintained, everything. So based on that, this will facilitate the renewable energy transmission. Similar thing was done in Tamil Nadu. Like in Tamil Nadu, the majority of the generation potential of wind is in the southern part, that is in Tirunelveli region. So to facilitate it, to export the power out of the state, the transmission systems were built and strengthening were built so that the power is evacuated to the respective load centers nearby. And this energy corridor also included dynamic reactive compensation and installation of energy storage and smart grid applications. And this also included establishment of renewable management centers. These are renewable management centers are centers where the forecasting is done at the central and complete renewable generation is monitored at the central level and in each renewable rich states, so that this will help in managing the uncertainty, variability, all those issues, and real-time monitoring will help in maintaining the grid stability of.
Okay. Well, thank you, Satvik. Thank you, Manish. If we go to the next slide, I think we have a few minutes for questions, if there are any, maybe 1 or 2 questions. And if there's nothing right away, that's all right too. We can always just use the chat box. So if we go to the next slide, I've tried to, just a moment. I think we have a question. What is your opinion about renewable energy auctions for economizing renewable energy tariff? Can you say a little bit more, Fahad? Can you say a little bit more about your question, please, so we have some context?
So, if I understand the question correctly, hi, this is Ilya Chernikovsky. I'll try to address the question. I think that you're referring to reducing the cost of a feed-in tariff that currently exists. So some examples of auctions that we can point to. One that really stands out is Mexico. Mexico, previously to implementing renewable energy auctions, had a very generous feed-in tariff. The issue with the feed-in tariff is that it is fixed for all projects that want to interconnect. And that fixed feed-in tariff does not necessarily keep up with the dynamics of a market in which the costs of technologies are declining. And so the renewable energy auctions allow the prices that are being paid to renewable energy producers to keep up with changing market dynamics, so reducing costs of technologies, which helps to reduce the final total cost of renewable energy procurement. And there was another question about whether renewable energy auctions are for large-scale renewable energy purchases, and I think the answer is yes. Most renewable energy auctions do focus on the large scale, on the utility scale of renewable energy generation. It doesn't have to be this way. There can be an auction for distributed small-scale renewable energy development, but that's not something that we've experienced so far. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Ilya. So I think moving on to the next portion of this online meeting, I think it'd be great to hear from you, country members of this community of practice, maybe what kind of renewable energy targets have been set in your country. Maybe there's some emission reduction targets or efficiency targets at the national level, regional level, local level. And then if there aren't any targets, how do you perceive this as affecting the deployment of large-scale renewables? What are some of the bottlenecks for defining these targets? Is it access to data for planning purposes, or is it a lack of maybe political engagement or support, or maybe there's not buy-in from the various energy sector stakeholders? Capacity building challenges, maybe for modeling and scenario building. And then if targets have been set, like they have in India, we just heard, what was the process? What worked well? what kind of stakeholders maybe are engaged in your country for setting some of these targets, or even energy policy? What role do they play? How do you interact with other agencies or groups involved in renewable energy development? And then do you perceive that there is more of a need for coordination among the various stakeholders? And if yes, do you have any proposals for how you might improve that coordination? And it would also be great to hear a little bit more about your role in all of this, all of these many things I just read off. So with that, I think, and if you've had some chance to think about this ahead of attending this meeting, it would be great to hear from you a little bit. And, if I'm just going to pick off because I can't see everyone. If someone wants to volunteer, that would be great. But otherwise, maybe Mr. Shah Haidar, do you want to talk a little bit about some of these questions that I just put up here?
Hear me, I'm Shah Zulfikar Haidar. Can you hear me, please?
We can hear you.
Oh, that okay. Can I talk now?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, the situation is different from country to country. For a country like India, they have got abundant land, and some land have got very good sunshine, especially in desert area. And then again, country like Bangladesh, very overpopulated, very small piece of land. Renewable energy, especially solar, has got different criteria. Our priority is to generate more, maybe from any source. So for a country like Bangladesh, or having landscape country, they need highly efficient, it may be concentrated solar system, or it may be some other form. Still, the efficiency of solar panel is a question. Then mindset of the common people is another issue. If I've seen those are educated people, even they are ignorant about renewable energy and its prospect. Then the climate issue, it is still debatable. But I think whatever be the case, the way the price is going down of renewable energy, especially in European country, its impact is seen in India, but in other countries it is not yet seen. Maybe shortage of expertise is a question, especially for grid integration. I would like to mention I was in a conference in ASEAN country, and there was a very knowledgeable person from India, from Delhi. He was sharing his grid integration of renewable energy, especially when it is raining or during hailstorm, and the interruptions were not acceptable to the users. So, but above all, you don't have any way out except to go for renewable energy, because fossil fuel is depleting, and even for vehicle sector, you won't find any fossil fuel transport, say after another 3-4 years. So you have to go for renewable energy. That's all from me. Thank you.
Mr. Haidar, can you say a little bit more about the stakeholder process, or maybe the lack of stakeholder process? You talked a little bit about the need for more renewable energy education. So is there, do you interact well with some of the other agencies that are involved in the sector in renewable energy development, or is that a challenge, would you say, for your country?
I said that Bangladesh has got a very good example that it has voted 4.5 million solar home system. They are small DC system. But with the improvement of national economy, people want more consumption of electricity. And that is a challenge for us, that we might have to switch over from individual solar home system to large scale production, maybe through solar wind. And for that, we need more highly efficient solar system that we are looking for. But at present, thumb rule is that for 1 megawatt of electricity, you need around 2.5 to 3 acres of land. But we are looking at, had it been more efficient, it would have been beneficial for any country. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pandey, would you like to speak? I know you're finally able to join us.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, yes. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, share your question again, please.
Well, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role in the renewable energy space in your country, in the energy sector, maybe, that would be helpful.
Okay, this is Argovinda Pandey, a program officer from Municipal Association of the Nepal, and especially I coordinate with municipalities of Nepal, entire municipalities of Nepal, and support municipality in policy level, policy dialogue, policy lobbying. And so I also participated in Vietnam program and interested in this energy, especially renewable energy related events. So, and coordinating with other municipal staffs to this program, but right now I am not unable, but next time I will connect to these people. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Can you speak a little bit about if there's any planning happening at municipal level? Or is the local government planning?
Yes, in municipal level, especially for renewable energy, municipalities are trying to establish solar energy, solar light at state level, and they have made their decision for sustainable development in their policy level to localize the sustainable related goals with renewable energy, and we have supported from national level. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tuan, would you like to speak? How about Sri Lanka? Randika, would you like to say a little bit about your experience?
So yes, we are happy to share. Hello, am I clear to talk now?
Yes, please go ahead.
We are happy to share our experience in this regard. Firstly, about the energy sector targets in our country. Well, we have a national energy policy, and which has specified certain targets for the achievement of renewable energy shares. Those, if I specifically mention, it was about 38% renewable energy share, and we achieved that in 2015. That was a past. And then we have the draft version of the new energy policy is now underway, and it is also emphasize the development of renewable energy and promote RE as indigenous resources for economic and other energy security reasons. And then we have the very strong target on greenhouse gas emission reduction. That is our national NDC communicated to United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, which states that we will reduce 20% of GHG by 2030. And that is the strongest target as of now, and all the power development plan, the long-term plans, are in compliance with that. In addition to that, we have another target that we have conveyed in 2016. The government has conveyed that to have 100%
I'm sorry, you're cutting out.
renewable energy system by 2050. It's a very ambitious targets, and now we are thoroughly working on incorporating that into our long-term development plans and all. And that's about the energy targets. And given that said, can you hear us?
It is not connection.
Proxy
Randika, can you say a little bit more about the kinds of resources, how you're expecting to reach some of these targets? Are they mostly solar? I know there's a lot of hydro, but then it's seasonal and there's issues with that in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Right. Now, in preparing the long-term plans to reach that targets, our main resources are now wind and solar. We were predominantly hydro system. We had about 35% energy share from the hydro and about 10% from the wind and solar. But now most of the hydro resources are utilized. Now, definitely the future focus is on wind and solar resources. We have very good wind resources in a part of the country and solar resources throughout the country. And we expect to integrate about 3,400 of wind and solar by 20 years time, and that is a lot. And also we have some certain intermediate targets for that as well. The government has some accelerated programs on rooftop solar development and other distributed generation schemes, and also we are proceeding with large scale wind and solar parks. And we address all those integration issues through our integration studies, and we continue to do that and incorporate it. And then to mention about the seasonality, we have very high seasonality in the hydro inflows as well as the wind, and that is very challenging from the integration perspective, and and also the variability of solar, and those are we see as most important challenges regarding the grid integration. Hello.
Thank you very much. I mean, I do have some follow-up questions, but I want to see if anyone else wants to speak. Bunua, would you like to speak? I'm not sure from Laos if you have, if you're able to connect. Would someone from Vietnam like to speak? I know there's been a lot of recent work on private sector investment. I know the conversation is a little bit towards strategic planning, but it'd be great to see how some of those targets were organized and set.
Let's move on. We don't have anything to speak in this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, so maybe I should open it up a little bit more and speaking even beyond maybe setting targets. We can move to the next slide, please. I think it's just going back a little bit to, some of the, so what we heard from you and your interests. It'd be good to align that again with maybe after your thoughts after you've heard this presentation. You've heard Ilya speak, you've heard Manish and Satvik speak, and you've heard each other speak and talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the things that are working well, maybe, or the fact that some of these targets have been set, like in Sri Lanka, and now the work is to actually meet those targets. So for our next session, we've tentatively planned one on smart incentives and enabling environment for renewable energy development. It'd be good to hear from this group if that's still of interest. Does that resonate with some of the challenges and issues? Does that sound interesting, work that's going on in your countries? Or would you, I mean, this is really, we want this to be member driven and demand driven. So it'd be good to hear from you to see if that still sounds interesting. If yes, great. If not, we'd love to hear more from you on topics that we could provide expertise. And then I guess I'll speak a little bit more on the next session in June. We're tentatively planning something at ASEF. And then Dana, Kenny, maybe we can also have a conversation offline, but it'd be good to coordinate and see if there's any, sessions we plan there or what some of the interests are in the region. And we don't have, you don't have to tell me all your thoughts right now. Go ahead, Dana.
No, I was just to say that that's a great idea. It's always been my intention. I did it on another project to try to promote LEDGP activities and even have the people who participate in webinars present in their countries. And I just haven't had a chance to do that here. So I'd be happy to follow up. And I'd be interested in who's nominated themselves in this area because our country coordinators were asking. So yeah, let's set up a follow-up. I think my email is there, right?
Yes.
My registration.
All right,
okay.
That sounds great.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. What about from some of the other participants? There's a session on smart incentives and maybe some sort of policy environment to promote renewable energy deployment. Does that sound interesting?
Now, from Sri Lanka point of view, I think yes, that is very interesting and very relevant because we are trying to address the integration issues, and we would like to see how these integration issues can be supported with new policy elements and strategies.
Okay, thank you.
Same is the case with Bangladesh, ma'am.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. And, as always, you can always contact us and give us more information either on this chat, or I think everyone has our contact information. I guess I'll go a little bit. If you go to the next slide, please. I just want to address a little bit. So the summary and we will develop a summary based on this conversation and have it online, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. Feel free to share with your colleagues. I guess I'd like to ask to see if there'd be interest in this group. I was thinking we could start an email chain with folks at least on this call, and there's other people who are very interested, but they had scheduling conflicts, so they cannot be here. But does that sound good if we maintain a group so we can always, exchange information with each other? I can post interesting, news articles, or just sort of keep this conversation going. It can also be an informal, like you can ask an expert very informally, and we can try and get that information back to you. Would that be of interest to you? We could start an email group. We could also start like a WhatsApp group. So I kind of just wanted to see what your thoughts are on that.
That will have better interaction in my view.
Excellent. Please feel free to speak. One way or the other is fine. So if you're okay with sharing email information with everyone, we'll plan to do that. And if you're not, feel free to email us. Our contact information is on the next slide, and we can certainly take you off the list. But it sounds like everyone would like to have that interaction. I guess, let's see. I also want to get a quick poll on, does the 2-hour session work for people? We did have technical difficulties at the beginning of the session, and we will do our best not to have the same issues at our next session. But I just wanted to get a brief sense of, I know 2 hours is a lot of time, but does this seem doable maybe once a month?
Yes, it's okay. It's not helpful for us.
Excellent. Well, and does this time of day work for most people?
Yes, it's working hour. It's Bangladesh.
Okay, and I guess we should poll people who are not on the call too. All right. And then maybe colleagues from ALP, would you like to add anything? I know we have 5 minutes left, so I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe if we move to the next slide, I think our contact information is on there. Are there any questions? Any last minute questions, comments? And, I understand not everyone will be able to attend all of these sessions, but we'll try to post summaries online and share with this group, with the larger group. So even if you're not on a particular webinar, we will, you've signed up for this community of practice, and we will definitely be in touch. And then if you have any preferences for your time, if you'd prefer the evenings instead of the mornings, feel free to send us any feedback. We'll set up a distribution list here in the next week or so, and then we'd appreciate your feedback. So please don't hesitate to speak up. We really want this to be something where we can provide an opportunity and a platform for peer exchange. But also, I guess I want to mention there is opportunity for technical expert assistance. So through Let's GP, we have a quick response short-term assistance that's limited to 40 hours, but we definitely work with you if it's something that needs more, if it's a review of a policy or just helping to move something to the next level. we can definitely do that. So this is intended to be a suite of activities and assistance that that's at your disposal, and we want to hear from you and cater to you. So it's definitely member driven. So I guess with that, if there's nothing else, I want to thank you once again. It's really exciting to see so many of you here, and I know this is a big challenge, and but we're all working toward it. So I look forward to working with you on these issues and talking more about it. And then please, write to us, reach out, check out our website. There's a lot of resources over there. And I guess that's it. I'd like to thank you very much. And if there's nothing else, just want to appreciate your time and being here with us today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. See you again.
Okay, thank you so much. See you in next event.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.